under the spotlight singing Strange Fruit. Billie Holiday's voice had mesmerized the entire Cotton Club. But when the applause died down, the reality waiting for her in the dressing room was horrific. On that autumn night in 1938, Lady Day would never speak about the trauma she experienced backstage, but the wounds on her body and the broken look in her eyes told the whole story. What happened at Harlem's most elite club wasn't just a racist attack. There were much darker forces behind it. Cotton Club's owners, police, and even the FBI would do everything to bury the traces of that night forever. Before we continue with this video, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any details of this mysterious story. Because the truth behind the horror Billie Holiday experienced will shock you. On the evening of October 23, 1938, cigarette smoke was curling through the air at Cotton Club's main hall as usual, with whiskey sparkling in crystal glasses. This club, considered the heart of Harlem, was one of the rare places where white elites could watch black performers in a safe environment. But this safety was only for the customers. For the artists, Cotton Club was an entirely different place. When Lady Day stepped onto the stage, she wore her signature gardenia flowers in her hair, her satin dress catching the stage lights and shimmering. Her mesmerizing voice reached every corner of the room, practically hypnotizing even the toughest audiences. That night was especially important because Cotton Club owner Owney Madden had special guests. Among them were police chiefs, city officials, and some businessmen. Strange Fruit wasn't yet in Billie Holiday's repertoire. She would start singing that song a year later, but that night she had enchanted listeners with pieces like Summertime and God Bless the Child. After her performance, the room gave her a standing ovation, and Lady Day retreated backstage with a triumphant smile on her face. She had no idea that smile would be short-lived. When she went backstage, Billie Holiday saw 3 men waiting at her dressing room door. One of them was Tommy, Cotton Club's security chief, but she didn't recognize the other 2. The expression on the men's faces wasn't friendly at all. Tommy told Lady Day she needed to talk to some people. Billie had a strong feeling that something was going wrong, but she couldn't yet grasp the severity of the situation. When she entered the dressing room and the door was locked behind her, they showed their true faces. The details of this part are so disturbing that Lady Day never spoke a single word about it as long as she lived. What's known is that the attack wasn't just physical, but also aimed at psychological destruction. The men repeatedly told Lady Day that she needed to know her place. They tried to send her the message that she had forgotten her place in Harlem, at Cotton Club, and in America in general, that she had overstepped her bounds. Along with racist slurs, threats that her career would be destroyed rained down on her. But what was truly horrifying was this detail. The attackers knew details about Lady Day's private life that they shouldn't have known. They were listing her problems with her mother Sadie, her financial difficulties, even the names of her close friends. This showed that the attack wasn't random, that it had been planned in advance and that Lady Day had been under surveillance for a long time. During the attack, she was also told that her singing style needed to change, a statement that would become much more meaningful years later in the context of the Strange Fruit ban. The sounds from the dressing room had been heard by other artists at Cotton Club, but none dared to intervene. Duke Ellington was performing in another section of the club that night and only learned about what happened the next morning. Club staff acted as if nothing had happened, with some even making remarks implying that Lady Day needed to leave early that night. This attitude suggested that the cover-up had been planned in advance. The attack lasted approximately 45 minutes. When Lady Day finally emerged from the dressing room, her gardenia flowers were scattered in her hair. The sleeve of her dress was torn. But what was most striking was the look in her eyes, an empty and broken expression as if her soul had separated from her body. There were clear finger marks on her arm and slight redness on her neck. No one asked her what had happened, as if she had become invisible. The next day, Cotton Club owner Owney Madden held a private meeting with Billie Holiday. The content of this meeting never fully came to light, but as a result, Lady Day was asked not to talk about the incident and to show hospitality. Madden had said that the club's reputation needed to be protected, that it shouldn't be blown out of proportion because of such minor incidents. Additionally, Lady Day was advised that she needed to pay attention to her behavior to avoid such problems. Even more shocking was the police department's attitude. When Lady Day dared to report what happened, she was told that nothing could be done due to lack of evidence. Moreover, the police gave her friendly advice that making such accusations could harm her career. This approach clearly showed that the system was protecting itself rather than protecting Lady Day. During this period, the FBI hadn't yet started closely monitoring Billie Holiday, but there were strong connections between local law enforcement and Cotton Club. While the club's illegal alcohol trade and gambling activities were ignored by police, violence against black artists was similarly neglected. This was Lady Day's first major experience with injustice. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be the last. After the Cotton Club incident, Billie Holiday's stage performances had changed. Her previously natural and relaxed stage presence was now anxious and defensive. Even when stepping away from the microphone, she would look behind her and didn't want to enter dressing rooms alone. Her close friends had noticed this change, but when they tried to bring up the subject, Lady Day would immediately change the topic. The most painful detail was that Lady Day continued to wear gardenia flowers in her hair. These flowers were no longer symbols of pure beauty and elegance for her, but had turned into a painful memory that reminded her of that night's horror. But she continued to wear them anyway, perhaps to appear strong, to show that she hadn't succumbed to the trauma. This stubborn attitude was one of the most striking features of Lady Day's character, her ability to transform even her greatest pains into strength. Sleep problems also began during this period. Lady Day couldn't sleep at nights and was constantly startled by door sounds. Her close friend Mal Waldron would confess years later that she would call him in the middle of the night saying someone was following her. This paranoia might not have been so unjustified, because the Cotton Club incident was indeed the first sign that Lady Day was being monitored. It would become clearer over time that the attack at Cotton Club wasn't just a random racist violence incident. The information the attackers had about Lady Day's private life showed that this incident had been planned in advance and was part of a larger plan. The goal wasn't just to cause physical harm, but to break her psychologically and teach her place. During that era in America, black artists were expected to stay within acceptable boundaries as defined by white society. Venues like Cotton Club were tools for maintaining this control. They showcased black talent to white customers while keeping these artists under strict discipline. Lady Day's naturally rebellious tone and stage charisma were powerful enough to threaten this system. The suggestion made to Lady Day after the attack to change her singing style was very significant. She wasn't singing Strange Fruit yet, but even the natural protest spirit in her voice was disturbing the system. This incident was actually a harbinger of the FBI surveillance and Strange Fruit bans that would happen years later. Lady Day had unknowingly become a target because of the power her voice carried. There were many people who saw or heard what happened at Cotton Club that night, but none of them spoke up. Other major names of the era like Duke Ellington, Count Basie, and Lena Horne continued working with Lady Day but never mentioned the Cotton Club incident. This silence wasn't just cowardice, it was an indicator of how the system worked. Those who spoke up could share the same fate. Club staff had also kept their mouths shut. From waiters to security guards, everyone acted as if nothing had happened that night. This coordinated silence showed that the incident wasn't just a momentary attack, but that there was an organized force behind it. Cotton Club management had warned staff that night not to be overly curious. The most painful detail was that other black artists at Cotton Club also distanced themselves from Lady Day. The system had frightened them too, creating anxiety that it might be contagious. Lady Day had been subjected not only to physical attack, but also to social isolation. This experience deepened her feelings of insecurity and formed the foundation for all the traumas she would experience in the future. In 1938, media outlets completely ignored the Cotton Club incident. Even black newspapers in Harlem didn't address this issue, because Cotton Club's economic and political power was very high during that period. Club owner Oni Madden's connections with police and press prevented such incidents from becoming news. The mainstream white press wasn't interested in the problems experienced by black artists anyway. Lady Day's situation was just a matter of club discipline for them. Some newspapers even indirectly praised Cotton Club as an orderly operating business, using how it dealt with problematic artists as an example. This approach was the clearest evidence of how distorted the system worked. Even years later, this incident didn't make it into the media. Even in Lady Day's biographies, it was only mentioned at the level of implication. Vague expressions like difficulties she experienced during the Cotton Club period were used, with details kept secret. This culture of secrecy covered up not just the incident, but how systemic racism operated. After the Cotton Club incident, Lady Day's view of the music world completely changed. Her career, which she had previously approached with only artistic concerns, had now turned into a struggle for survival. Every new club, every new contract now meant a potential danger. This paranoid approach wasn't entirely unjustified either, because the system really was working against her. Even the songs she chose for her repertoire were now selected with more careful consideration. She tried to stay away from lyrics that could be considered too rebellious or provocative, but still struggled not to lose the natural power of her voice. This balancing effort exhausted her both artistically and psychologically. The biggest change occurred in her trust in people. The fact that no one came to her aid during the Cotton Club incident had fundamentally changed Lady Day's view of the world. She could no longer fully trust even her closest friends and lived in constant expectation of betrayal. This feeling of distrust would also form the foundation for the addiction problems she would experience in the future. During the Cotton Club incident, the FBI wasn't yet actively monitoring Billie Holiday, but the relationship between local law enforcement and the club was giving the first examples of the extensive surveillance network that would be established in the future. During that period, the police department kept lists of problematic black artists, and Lady Day's name was added to this list after the Cotton Club incident. This listing system would form the infrastructure for the comprehensive surveillance operation that the FBI would set up years later. The information gathered about Lady Day at Cotton Club, her private life, weaknesses, close circle, would be used to pressure her in the future. That night witnessed not just a physical attack but the beginning of a systematic surveillance operation. The details the attackers had about Lady Day's private life showed that this information had been collected beforehand. Intelligence had probably been gathered through club staff, other artists, or people in her close circle. This method would be perfected by the FBI years later, and would follow Lady Day until her death. The Cotton Club incident affected not only Billie Holiday but all black artists of the era. Names like Duke Ellington, Lena Horne, and Count Basie closely followed what happened to Lady Day and were reviewing their own positions. The message was clear. The system wants your art but also wants to control it. This incident created more awareness among other artists about invisible boundaries. They began to be more careful in repertoire choices, stage performances, and even their private lives. What Lady Day experienced had shown them what they were up against. This atmosphere of censorship would also negatively affect the natural development of jazz music. Despite this atmosphere of fear, some artists tried to support Lady Day. Duke Ellington continued to have her perform at his private concerts while Lena Horne provided emotional support. This solidarity was a beautiful example of how the black artist community united against the system's pressures. Documents released in the 1970s under the Freedom of Information Act revealed the true dimensions behind the Cotton Club incident. Among police reports were files where Lady Day had been marked as a potential security risk. This marking had been made immediately after the Cotton Club incident and would form the legal basis for future FBI surveillance. The documents also contained cooperation agreements between Cotton Club management and the police department. According to these agreements, the club would provide information to police about problematic artists, and in return, illegal activities would be ignored. Lady Day had unknowingly become a victim of this dirty deal. The most shocking document was a report sent to the FBI just 3 days after the Cotton Club incident. This report stated that Lady Day might be a communist sympathizer and needed to be carefully monitored. Even though she hadn't sung Strange Fruit yet, the natural spirit of rebellion her voice carried was enough to disturb the system. Despite the Cotton Club horror, Billie Holiday didn't give up. Her genius for transforming trauma into music became even more evident during this period. The emotional depth and pain in her songs now came not only from personal experiences but also from the anger created by systematic oppression. This transformation made her voice even more powerful. Especially her addition of Strange Fruit to her life was an indirect result of this trauma. What she experienced at Cotton Club had shown her the true face of racism in America. Without this experience, she might never have decided to sing that brave song. This ability to transform pain into art made Lady Day not just a singer but a social justice warrior. Changes were also observed in her stage performances. Her approach, which had previously focused only on entertainment, now turned toward giving messages to listeners. She sang every song as if it were a manifesto, challenging the system with the power of her voice. This attitude made her even more dangerous but also ensured her legendary status. Ironically, while Cotton Club was closing in the 1940s, Lady Day's career was reaching its peak. Despite all the pressure used to intimidate her, the power of her voice had increased even more. She had become world famous with Strange Fruit and had responded most powerfully to what was done to her at Cotton Club. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that Lady Day had an indirect effect on Cotton Club's closure. The systemic racism that targeted her had begun to attract attention, and white liberal circles had begun questioning such venues. Lady Day's brave stance hadn't changed the system, but it had made it questionable. The strongest victory, however, was her musical legacy. Lady Day, who transformed the horror she experienced at Cotton Club into her art, had proven her unique ability to turn pain into beauty. The trauma she experienced in that dressing room that night had made her stronger instead of breaking her. This spirit of resistance continues to inspire even decades after her death. Years later, in 1959, on her deathbed at Metropolitan Hospital, Billie Holiday said one sentence to nurse Margaret Davis about Cotton Club: "I died that night, I just kept breathing." These words showed that the wound the Cotton Club trauma had opened in Lady Day's soul had never healed. Even 21 years later, the traces of that night remained fresh. Even while police waited in her hospital room, Cotton Club memories kept spinning in Lady Day's mind. According to what she told the nurses, under the influence of morphine, the past mixed with the present, and sometimes she thought she was in the 1938 dressing room. "Don't lock the door," she kept murmuring, Bussaglu, final echo of the Cotton Club horror. In a 1955 performance at Village Vanguard, after the concert, Billie Holiday had told sound engineer George Avakian her Cotton Club memories. This conversation had been secretly recorded, and when the recordings emerged in the 1980s, Lady Day's details about that night would come to light. "They didn't want to kill me," she had said that night. "They wanted to kill my soul." The recordings also revealed that Lady Day knew the identities of the attackers at Cotton Club. "Tommy was just the beginning. The real orders were taken by the other two," she had said. The identity of these two people is still unknown, but Lady Day's description of them as like police but not police suggested they had connections to organized crime. The most striking detail was this: the attackers had warned Lady Day not to sing songs like Strange Fruit, but Strange Fruit hadn't even been written yet at that time. This situation showed that the attack was aimed at preventing her future potential rebellion. The system had sensed the danger Lady Day's voice carried in advance and tried to take precautions. After the Cotton Club incident, Louis Armstrong had unexpectedly supported Billie Holiday. Pops would invite Lady Day to his private concerts and try to boost her morale. However, he couldn't show this support openly because his own career could be at risk. In Armstrong's personal diaries were lines referring to the Cotton Club incident. "What was done to Lady Day was a warning to all of us." Through Armstrong's organization, benefit concerts for Lady Day had been secretly arranged. The income from these concerts had been used during the financial difficulties Lady Day experienced after Cotton Club. Pops was standing against the system under the name of Musical Brotherhood, but was doing it very carefully. This secret solidarity network was one of the most beautiful examples of loyalty among black musicians. In 1942, Eleanor Roosevelt had sent a private letter to Billie Holiday. This letter was found in White House archives in the 1990s and contained an indirect reference to the Cotton Club incident. Roosevelt wrote that we live in times when art requires courage, and that she was aware of the difficulties some artists face. The letter also encouraged Lady Day to preserve the power of her voice. Roosevelt noted that systemic change is only possible with brave voices. This letter had become a great source of morale for Lady Day and had been influential in her decision to sing Strange Fruit. The First Lady's support showed that at least someone at the highest levels of administration was on her side. In the 1950s, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was closely following Billie Holiday's music and story. He had confessed to close friends that he was inspired by listening to Strange Fruit during the Montgomery bus boycott. King saw what Lady Day experienced at Cotton Club as the reflection of systemic racism in the music world. Some of the metaphors King used in his 1963 "I Have a Dream" speech are thought to be inspired by Strange Fruit. The phrase "trees where injustice hangs" was a direct reference to Lady Day's song. The spirit of resistance that began at Cotton Club had thus transformed into the spirit of the civil rights movement. In the 1970s, Maya Angelou had listened to the details of the Cotton Club incident during one of her last meetings with Billie Holiday. According to Angelou's memories, Lady Day had said, "That night they tried to kill not just my body but my confidence in my music." This conversation had affected Angelou so much that she made indirect references in her book I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Angelou described Lady Day's Cotton Club trauma as a microcosm of the black woman experience. It showed the reality that even being talented couldn't protect us, in fact made us even bigger targets. Angelou's writings about Lady Day became important reference sources in feminist and civil rights movements. When Abby Lincoln decided to continue Billie Holiday's legacy in the 1960s, she had also learned the Cotton Club story. Lincoln saw the traumas Lady Day experienced as the common experience of black female artists. There were pieces dedicated to Lady Day in her We Insist, Freedom Now Sweet album. Lincoln's indirect references to the Cotton Club incident in her performances required great courage at that time. However, the civil rights atmosphere of the 1960s allowed these topics to be discussed more openly. Abbey Lincoln carried on the resistance Lady Day had started to the next generation, ensuring the continuity of the power created by the Cotton Club horror. Today, artists like Beyoncé, Alicia Keys, and John Legend reference the Cotton Club incident when talking about Billie Holiday. This trauma is no longer just a painful memory of the past, but has become a symbol of artistic resistance. Lady Day's ability to transform that night into music inspires today's artists, especially when Strange Fruit became popular again during the Black Lives Matter movement. The Cotton Club story also came to the forefront. Content shared on social media with the hashtag "From Cotton Club to Ferguson" emphasized that systemic racism continues. What Lady Day experienced in 1938 continues to remain relevant in 2020. The latest FBI documents released in 2010 revealed the dimensions of the surveillance operation initiated after the Cotton Club incident. It was understood that Lady Day had been filed as a potential threat since 1938, and her daily activities were being reported. The Cotton Club horror wasn't just that night's trauma, but the beginning of 21 years of surveillance. The documents also revealed that Cotton Club management had signed a cooperation protocol with the FBI. According to this protocol, the club would provide regular reports about subversive artists. Lady Day would unknowingly be under agents' observation with every performance. This surveillance network expanded over the years to become a nationwide system. The attack on Billie Holiday at Cotton Club that horrible night wasn't just an attack on a woman, but an attack on the power of art and freedom. But Lady Day's story shows us that even the greatest traumas can be transformed into the most powerful art in the right hands. The horror experience that night was terrible, but the music born from it will live forever. Billie Holiday's voice will exist much longer than those who tried to silence her. Cotton Club's doors close, attackers are forgotten, but Lady Day's songs still echo in every corner of the world. Strange Fruit continues to be sung. Cotton Club trauma continues to create a spirit of resistance against injustice. This is perhaps the greatest justice, living forever, as a unique story where pain transforms into beauty, trauma into power,